everyone. Welcome to K-Pop A History. Today we're going to learn about the history and growth of K-pop from a fan's first-hand experience and perspective. And the fan that we're hearing from is a librarian named Miss Beth. Hi, Beth. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good. So, you have been immersed in the K-pop world for a while now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, why don't you start off by telling us a bit about how you got into K-pop and how long you've been a fan?
I got into K-pop when I was in high school. I was in the anime club in high school, and a lot of the kids I knew were into like J-pop. They were into K-pop, so they kind of would play that kind of music, and
Lead to a lot of crossovers.
yeah, there's a lot of crossover between anime fans and K-pop fans. At least the ones that I knew. So that was back when I was in high school. So that was probably around like 2008, 2007, 2008, I want to say.
Nice. So, definitely over a decade, you've been really into the fandom aspect of it and consuming the media.
Yeah, I was like, I started out kind of like listening to it casually. I was like, oh, I know Girls' Generation, I know Big Bang, and I listened to a couple of their songs, and I was like, they're good. I like them. Because those were the songs that my friends would play for me. And then I got more and more into it as time went on. And now I'm like very much into it. I have a lot of favorite groups. I have a bunch of albums. I have posters, that kind of thing.
So, in your perspective, from someone who's seen 13 plus years of K-pop, what do you feel is kind of how it is defined as a genre by the fandom and by kind of the community at large who are finally starting to really get involved in listening to it mainstream?
Well, for me, what K-pop is it's its name. It's Korean pop. So it's basically pop music in Korean.
Yes.
That's what K-pop is to me. So it's usually groups or from Korea that perform in Korean. That's what it is to me. And it's all different genres they have as well. It's not just K-pop. I think a lot of people kind of put other non-K-pop groups into the K-pop genre. I think they just think it's,
Just because
just
of the
all
language
music,
or the
you know?
origin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different types of music. They have rap, they have indie, they have rock, they have, classical. They have like their own genres as well that we don't have over here. Um, it's basically like any other country with their music. We all have like our own different types of music.
Yes.
And that's basically what K-pop is. It's Korean pop music.
Now, when it comes to the different groups, because I see a lot of K-pop gets focused in around not always just individuals, but groups specifically. There seems to be a really decent size range that you can see where I've seen groups that are just a few members versus groups where it's upwards of a dozen members. So could you give us a little insight into what size range you usually tend to see in K-pop groups?
It's like I would say like 4 to 8. There's groups that I like that have 5 members. There's some groups that have 2. There's some that have 3. It kind of depends on what the group is going for in terms of style of music. Sometimes if it's like a very like performance heavy kind of group, it kind of is cool to have a lot of different members because you have all these working parts on stage. So you have like can have some very cool like visual effects when it comes to dance moves, and it looks really cool. But if you're more of like a vocal group, you don't want to have as many members because it's more performance based. So you want to have like fewer members because if you're on stage and you're doing all these complicated moves, it can take away from, the very like passionate vocals that they're giving out. So it kind of depends on the style of like music that they're doing. Well, they're all K-pop. It's like, some groups want to do more like ballad type music and some are very like, upbeat.
Gotcha. So, when in thinking of the different sizes of groups, can you tell me what the largest group is that you've seen?
NCT, probably the biggest one. I think they have 21 members, I want to
That's a lot of
say.
people. Nice.
Yes. But it's like broken down. So they have like the main group. They don't release like songs together because that would just be insane. But they have different subunits,
Okay,
which
so
is something.
the full 21 member groups they don't release album together, they release it as the subunits.
Yes, so you
Okay,
have
cool.
like the different subunits. Even like main groups, like regular groups, will have like their own subunits, and it'll usually just be a few members from like the main group. For NCT, it's all subunits, and it's kind of like they focus on different, I would say, different styles of kind of pop music.
Okay, very cool. So I guess the next question then is, from seeing and being part of the rise of K-pop fans, specifically in the United States, what do you think were some of the major milestones in K-pop becoming a phenomenon in our country?
Um, I think it's hard to kind of pinpoint like one specific thing because it's kind of always been creeping over, and it's always been big in other countries even before here. I think we're kind of like the ones who have been kind of behind in terms of being up on K-pop, because groups have been coming over here for years. We just haven't been paying attention. I
Yes.
think in like maybe like 2008, the Wonder Girls came over when they released Nobody because it was so huge in Asia. It was like a big breakthrough song all over here, and they did an English version of it. So they did come over here. You had groups like Girls' Generation and 2NE1 have concerts in the US. And I think that's really important when talking about how K-pop broke through in the U.S. I think it's very important to talk about those kind of things because I think they get ignored a lot because this was a really long time ago that they kind of came over here.
But they're the
But I
ones
think
that set the foundation more.
exactly, they were the ones who kind of were the first ones to kind of come over here and say, "Hi, we're from Korea. We're in a group. Here's our songs," and kind of like introduce that. And I think we also have to recognize the groups that kind of broke through the boundaries from Korea as well, because without them, groups like BTS or Blackpink, who have been very big over here recently, they wouldn't have been out of Korea at all. They
Yeah.
would still be there. So you have groups like TVXQ and Super Junior and Big Bang, who released these very big songs that kind of broke through into other countries as well and inspired people from those countries to be like, hey, maybe we should, go over to Korea and join a K-pop group. I want to do this.
So, just because you mentioned a bit about how there's been so much going on in K-pop through multiple time periods here, one of the things that I know that I've come into here and there is talking about different time periods in K-pop and having them broken down and certain groups being specified with these different time periods. Could you kind of break those down for us and give us a little bit of explanation into what they are?
Okay, so you have the first generation, second generation, third generation, and fourth generation. The first generation, they're the groups that kind of laid the foundation. They were like the first ones to be kind of like, you know, to compare them to American groups, they would be kind of like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. So they had groups like HOT, they had BoA, who's a singer, SES, Baby Vox. So these were like very popular groups over there that kind of laid the foundation for K-pop becoming kind of a big deal. Then you have the second gen groups, which is when groups started to spread out of Korea. So you had TVXQ, Girls' Generation, Big Bang, Wonder Girls, Super Junior. These are all, groups that kind of started to get big outside of Korea. Then you have third gen, which is a little more recent. That started in 2010, I want to say, 2017. These tend to be the groups that became, really started to become popular in the West. So you have, you have Blackpink, BTS, EXO, Twice, Red Velvet. These are all groups that started to become very popular over here. And then with fourth gen, those are like the modern day kind of K-pop groups. These are groups that are very new.
So
So those
any
would,
since like 2017?
yeah. So
Yep.
since 2017, so we're talking about groups like TXT, ITZY, G Idol, kind of groups like that. Very recent. Um,
So in speaking about, of course, like all these different generations, when you go back to kind of like the generation one, generation two, a lot of people who are listening to K-pop now might be more focused in hearing the newer stuff, the stuff that's come out in generation three and four. But who do you think are some of the really classic need to knows of K-pop that people really should, if they're getting involved in the fandom of it, if they're really looking to see how K-pop has evolved, that they should be looking into, giving a chance, and listening to?
Definitely, I think TVXQ, their vocal group. Um, you really need to at least listen to "Neurotic" by them. Probably one of their most famous songs, I want to say. They're really big in Japan. They were kind of one of the big groups that broke in over there. They're probably the biggest K-pop group over there, one of the biggest. Boa, she's a first gen singer. Very popular, huge. Like, she has come over here. She's released English music. Like, she is very popular.
I know,
Like,
as someone who used to who watched a lot of anime, any AMVs that I would see on YouTube, almost every single show would have an AMV using her song "Every Heart."
oh yeah.
Yep.
No, Boa. When it comes to her and TVXQ, those were like the two groups that, like, if you were like into anime, those were like the two, like, people. They were the ones that everyone like was like, yep, they're my favorites. I think even TVXQ, if you're a One Piece fan, you've probably heard them sing because they did like an ending song for them one time. That's
Hmm.
kind of how big they are in Japan. Big Bang. I don't think you can talk about K-pop without talking about Big Bang. Probably one of the biggest groups to ever come out. A lot of people I know love Big Bang. They're very kind of like over the top, very, I don't want to say ridiculous, but they're very like out there in terms of like their personalities. It's very like bombastic. It's like you're just like, wow, this is a group.
It's
Girls,
eccentric and fun, and
yeah, they're
yeah,
just they always look like they're having like a good time on stage, which I think is very important. They have like that stage presence to them where they don't just look they don't just want to have a good time, they want you to have a good time too.
nice.
Girls' Generation, Korea's girl group. They're like number one girl group in the world. You can't I don't think you can listen to K-pop without listening to G at least once. That was the first K-pop song I ever heard. uh, Everyone was like, "You need to listen to this song. This is music." And I love them. I think they're great. Super Junior, um, one of the biggest groups I think outside of Korea. They're like huge outside. I was listening to a member of NCT who's from Thailand talk about them, and he was saying that the reason he got into K-pop is because his grandmother likes Super Junior, which I thought was hilarious. 2NE1, like, if you love Blackpink style, you need to listen to 2NE1, because Blackpink would not exist without 2NE1 laying that foundation of being like, you don't need to be, a girly girl. You can also be kind of this cool, very in your face kind of girl as well. You can be that. Shiny, one of my all time favorites. If you see a group that has very complex kind of dancing, the reason that they are able to do that now is because of Shiny. Shiny was one of the first groups to have very complicated, very like, just amazing stages where they would just have these incredible dance moves that they did every time they were on stage.
Now, jumping off of that, I know that a lot of the things that I've seen in my interactions with fans of K-pop is that learning the dances to certain songs and watching the MVs that are released over and over again to get those dances down has seemed like a really big part of the experience of being a K-pop fan. And I was wondering how you saw dance in relation to how important it is to K-pop music.
Well, there have been groups that have gotten famous in K-pop strictly on the dances alone. You have groups like EXID who went viral. They were like a group that nobody listened to, and then all of a sudden, they became. There was a video of one of the members that went viral on the internet dancing, and they became a really big group. You have a group like Crayon Pop who their dance itself went viral, and there are videos of people in Korea who would do the dance. And these aren't like complicated dances that they came up with. They're fairly simple that like anyone can do.
And that's probably part of the appeal.
They're memorable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the important thing, is that the dances can become their own thing and become memorable to fans and create their own fandoms. Groups like Momoland, like when Boom Boom came out, they were kind of like, a very underground group, and then they went viral.
So sorry, continue.
So I think that's something, you don't necessarily need to have like these complicated dances. I think they can look super cool. And especially if you're an established group, you can show like, look how we're able to do this on stage and this, that, and the other thing. But I think for smaller groups, you can create like a complicated dance to get that attention, but you don't necessarily have to. You can create a memorable dance and,
that's more accessible for the everyday fan to learn.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. So I think my next question here is, who are the current major groups in play that people are really they're looking for their next big hit? They're looking to get the merchandise for them, the ones that are really well known at this point.
I think BTS and Blackpink are kind of like the two big ones over here. Mm-hmm. They're kind of like very popular over here. Most K-pop fans are like, I like that BTS and Blackpink. I would also say Red Velvet. They're pretty big. EXO, I think they're huge. I think they're kind of I don't think they're as big in the US as they are in Asia. They're giants over there. They really are. NCT, very popular. Twice. ITZY, I think, is really starting to become like a very kind of showing that they're a group that's kind of a force to be reckoned with. They're becoming very big in their own right as well.
I know I've had Icy on repeat.
They've become like a big one, I would say.
Nice. And then what groups do you think they're just starting to come out? You've seen like some of their first singles, things like that, that you think really could become like the next group on the rise and that we should really be watching out for?
I think Dreamcatcher is a group that really should be watched out for. They debuted in 2017, I think. I've been following them since then. They're kind of like they're a K-pop group, but they kind of also they mostly do like rock music. So they have these dances and all this stuff, but their music is rock. It's more rock focused.
So it mixes the genres a bit.
Oh yeah, they try to go for every genre.
Okay.
All of their songs sound like it could be in an AMV on YouTube.
That's awesome.
Every single one of them sounds like it could be an anime opening. They're a lot of fun, and they're starting to finally get some recognition in Korea with their last couple of releases. They've been kind of big over in Europe and South America. They're very popular over there, but they're finally starting to become a little more popular in Korea, and they're starting to get that attention that I think they might become like a group that really could break through soon. And the same for ATEEZ. A lot of Dreamcatcher fans I've noticed have been ATEEZ fan because they have the same producers on their songs. So, they're another group I think are starting to become like a favorite among people, and they're a group to look out for. They're a newer group as well. They're one to look out for, and if you're, I would say you should check them out. And then of
Awesome.
course Luna, I think most people know of. You see them mentioned online all the time. They've become like a very popular group. I think they're gonna. I think they have the possibility to start breaking through. They're very lucky in the sense that they have the backing of the guy who runs the same company that groups like Girls' Generation, TVXQ, and Super Junior are from. So I think they could really start rising to the top.
So, with all of these different groups, of course, that have been in play for different points in time, and some of them are still together even from a decade earlier. But there are, of course, the groups that end up breaking up. And I was wondering, how have you, as a fan, kind of seen and experienced the witnessing how groups break up and what usually happens to the K-pop members, the K-pop group members, where they usually go from K-pop, and how fans usually react to the news of one of their groups breaking up?
I think it's different for every group. It kind of depends on what the members want. Because some of them, they become solo artists. They're like, I'm going to become a singer. That's what I want to do. You have the member of the Wonder Girls. Most of them became solo singers. You have Sunmi, who is a very popular singer on her own right, and she's a former Wonder Girls member. But you also have other people who are former K-pop members who go into acting. You know, a very popular actress right now, Nana. She has been in a bunch of stuff. She's been in movies and TV shows, and she's been very recognized for her acting talent. She's a former member of a girl group known as After School, as well as its subunit Orange Caramel. So it kind of depends, I think, what the group members want. Because some of them, they're like, we want to stay in this group forever. And maybe they won't release things as often as they did as when they start. Because maybe they'll have like 3 releases, the first year together. But then, later on they'll have like 1 release. And they won't really promote as much or be on TV. But
And they end up
some of
focusing
them,
on their different side projects, things like that.
yeah, they do like different side projects too. Some of them are TV presenters. A lot of them will go and they'll become like hosts for TV shows. They'll do like they have a type of show over there that are kind of like a variety shows that we don't really have over here, where it's mostly like a bunch of like people. They're hosts, they're comedians, they're musicians, and they're all like it's like time for them to kind of get together, and it kind of depends on the show. They'll talk to like current K-pop groups, or it'll be like a game show, and it'll be time for them to just kind of like have fun, be funny, kind of do that kind of thing. A lot of them will do that as well.
So, with all of the changing technology that's happened so much, especially during the time period that K-pop has really been on the rise, breaking through into all sorts of different countries. How has the way that fans consume K-pop changed throughout the past decade with all of the rises of the different social media platforms?
You can actually get like albums and stuff and merchandise now. Like back in the day, it was usually like really difficult to kind of get that. Like my friends would have to pull up like really kind of like weird AMV videos on YouTube and be like, you need to listen to this song, and they couldn't buy the albums. It was kind of you couldn't. It was harder to connect with other fans as well, because a lot of them tended to be Asian. They tended to be Korean, and some of us don't speak Korean.
Yeah, different language barriers, things like that.
Yeah, so it was very difficult to find other K-pop fans or get any merchandise. It was kind of just you were just hanging out being like, well, I like K-pop, and you would just kind of go on YouTube every once in a while and be like, hey, has my favorite group, has Super Junior released a new song? How about the Wonder Girls? What are they up to? That's kind of like the only way we were able to get any information, because all of the information was Korean. We couldn't get that information. Nowadays, I think it's a lot easier. You have like Twitter. A lot of the groups now they'll publish, their tweets or their Instagram posts in Korean and English. There's a lot of groups that will do this now, or there'll be fans who will translate, tweets of idols for the fans.
Yes, and then also there's the whole you have auto translate on several different social media apps now, so that makes it probably easier to connect with the individual fans even.
Yeah, probably one of my favorite things is that Shiny, for like, they were celebrating how long how long they've been together, or something like that, and one of the members was doing like a Q&A on Twitter. They had him do a Q&A on Twitter, and he was able to connect to the fans that way.
That's extremely awesome, just seeing how much it's changed and how much more accessible K-pop has become to people from in all countries. So I guess next then would be, how have you seen how that's affected the interactions within the virtual community of fans?
Not to kind of like really show how of an old K-pop fan I am, but like back in the day, it was like Girls' Generation's fans, Sones against Blackjack's 2NE1 fans, and I didn't often see fights between them because I didn't really like look for that kind of stuff. It was harder to find fans who were into the same groups that you were into, but at the same time, you really didn't see that many like fights in between
the fan
fans.
wars. Yeah.
Now I see it a lot more often. I see people who get very angry. You'll be like, oh, I like this group, and someone will be like, well, you shouldn't, they're terrible or whatever. But at the same time, I've made a lot of friends who were into the same groups I'm into, which I didn't have that 10 years ago.
Very good. Yeah, there's been so much change, and it's really nice to see that you're able to build communities of fandoms easier now, especially in so many like cross-cultural interests.
Yeah.
So, in speaking of that, what platforms do you use to follow the information about current groups and learn about new releases for yourself?
I think Twitter is probably the best way. I would say most idol groups tend to have Twitter. And most of them also tend to have a second Twitter that'll translate it. They're usually not with the company that the group is from, but they're like fans of the group as well, and they'll translate all of the information for you if they don't release it in English themselves. Nice. So I use Twitter a lot. That's how usually I keep up with new releases from my favorite groups. Tumblr is how I find out about new groups in general, and how I find very underground groups or very old groups that people have forgotten about. Someone will be like, hey, is anyone a fan of this group? And I'll be like, I've never even heard of this group. And then I'll look them up. So I like kind of finding platforms that kind of allow me to do that, where I get to not just find about current groups, but also about, very underground groups that come from very small companies that are coming out or came out a while ago and just haven't, hit mainstream.
Nice. And then another question that just came into my head just from listening to what you were saying about there is, how easy is it to get the new releases digitally for like groups that are underground? Like, are they on things like iTunes as readily available as some of the other popular artists you might be interested in?
I think it depends on the group. It depends on how small of a company. I personally, I use Spotify usually, or I'll buy the album online. There's like a ton of sites online that sell Korean products. They just sell stuff from Korea.
So like the physical CDs and things like that?
Yep.
Gotcha.
They will sell physical copies of the CDs, so you can
Nice.
usually get them for $15. But most groups tend to, even like very small groups, they will still have like a physical release, so you'll be able to get it that way. And of course, you can always support them on YouTube, which is always really important to show that you're supporting them and that you are a fan and you want to
See more content.
yeah, exactly. You want to see more content from them.
So speaking of wanting to see more content, I'm interested in finding out what your current favorite group is that you want to see more content from.
I've been listening to Shiny a lot. They're really one of my all-time favorite groups. They're a group that debuted like many years ago. They're one of my favorite groups. They're amazing dancers, amazing singers. They just have this presence to them that you just can't take your eyes off of. I love them. I think they're fantastic. One of their members just released like his some of his solo stuff very recently, which I bought the album for, and I've been nonstop listening to that. So that's kind of been what my go-to. I've been listening to Taemin's new album, Never Gonna Dance Again, which if you haven't listened to it, you really should. It's amazing. He is incredibly talented. So yeah, that's been my really kind of go-to listen to right now.
Awesome. And I know when I mentioned this question to you before, when I wanted to ask what your favorite song is, it was just like there's too many. So I'm hoping you can give us like your top 5 favorite songs. Which ones do you really want people to go home tonight and listen to?
Num- Probably number 1 is Sherlock Clue and Note by Shiny. I talk about them a lot. If you know me in real life, I do this too. One of my all-time favorite songs, just in general. It's just everything about it is so good. Roly Poly by Tiara. They're a second gen group. Roly Poly is probably their biggest song ever. It is such a good song. It's kind of disco inspired. So it's very kind of, it's got that groove to it that you're like, oh, this is fun. I like this a lot.
Fun to dance to.
Yes. Catalina by Orange Caramel. Orange Caramel is probably my all-time favorite K-pop group. They're a subunit of a group called After School. And they're very inspired by trot music, which is it's a type of Korean music. It tends to have a very kind of bouncy beat to it. I like trot music. I think it's a lot of fun. And Orange Caramel is very upbeat. They're very strange because it's like a mix of like trot music and almost like J-pop, I want to say. So they're very out there. It's very colorful. They're a lot of fun. I love them. Love Shot by EXO. I think that's in general just
yes.
one of the best songs in general I think I've ever heard.
Oh yeah.
Just everything about it is just very good.
I know that one's gotten really popular. Even one of my best friends was performing a dance to it at a party recently.
It's you just can't not dance to it. It's such a good song. That's another song I've been listening to a lot lately. And then Black Suit by Super Junior is one of Super Junior. With them, my favorite song by them is like constantly always changing because I love them. And that one is it's a lot of horns. I like songs that have a lot of like horns in them. And it's just a fun song. I really like that, and I really like them. So those are my top 5 currently. Don't worry, it'll change.
Always got new stuff coming, and so much more to discover even. So I think that's about it for the questions I've got. So thank you very much, Beth, for coming on and giving us your kind of rundown of your experience as a K-pop fan and giving us a lot of new groups and songs to really get to seek out and listen to and explore.
Thanks for having me. And just remember that there's like a ton of lists online of like number 1 like Korean songs that were kind of like the biggest song of that year, because those are lists that I tend to look at, and when I look at them, I always find new songs for me to listen to, new groups to kind of become interested in. It's just a great way to find new music for me to enjoy.
Awesome.
And if you're a K-pop fan, that's what you want. You just want to find new music that you can listen to and have fun.
Great tip. Awesome. So, thank you everyone who tuned in to listen to our K-pop panel today. And yeah, go out, explore the world of K-pop, listen to some new music, and share your love of the groups and songs that you've already been really into and excited about. Get more people involved in this wonderful genre of music. All right. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.